Today's webinar is on 5 stages of a company drone program. So a little bit of background to this. We've been hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations and drone pilots we've spoken to over the years, Dave especially. And what we've sort of noticed is that a singular pattern that most companies tend to flow through. And it's a framework that we use ourselves with our clients to see where they're currently at in their maturity scale, what do they need, what challenges they're going through. And we realize that it's a very helpful exercise that we do with our clients on a one-to-one basis and people we meet in the industry. So we thought probably a good idea that we could share this at a one-to-many scale and share it with everyone else who might need some help or maybe starting or scaling or maturing or refining their drone programs. So starting this one today. So glad everyone could make it. Hope you get something out of it. There'll be some polls, some questions, and we'll step through each of the stages with Dave in just a second. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dave on the screen there. If you maybe hit a couple more times. There we go. Cool. So for those, we've got a couple of people on the line who know Dave already, but for those who don't, so Dave's our founder and CEO. So Dave's been in the drone industry for many, many years, as well as an engineer, both mechanical and structural for many years. Dave's an operator and has consulted to everyone from the mining industry to resources to construction, and is very well versed. So there's probably no one else more equipped, definitely more than myself, to talk about this today. And Dave can pull from a bunch of different experiences and examples from the industry, both Australia and New Zealand, and you're now looking across everywhere from Europe and Canada as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dave to talk about this better than I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, my name's David Cole. If you haven't met me before, and what I thought I'd just kick off today is just a little quick overview of sort of our journey. So we started back in the drone industry in Australia in 2013 as a commercial drone service provider. In that journey, we were struggling to manage our own operations with the amount of paperwork that we had to deal with. So we basically built our own electronic management platform, which we launched in 2018. Since then, we've gone on to be verified by the regulator in Australia to provide automated airspace authorizations and automated rule checking. More recently, we've achieved our ISO certification for information security. And sort of what we work on at the moment is really enabling automated and complex operations. So with that little bit of background behind us, let's jump into the 5 stages of a company drone program. So as Alex mentioned, a lot of the motivation for this is, well, it's a frequent question we always get asked is, what should I do? And the answer is, it depends, because it depends at what stage you're at as to what things you should focus on. So what we really want to try and answer today is, where are you on your drone journey? In the framework that we've formulated. Now, not everyone is going to perfectly fit into the framework because everyone's different, every journey is different, but we think you'll see some sort of common elements you can relate to, and that will give you a sense of where you're at. So, enough talking about it. Let's see it. So the 5 stages that we've come up with it's essentially the 5 S's. So starting out, seeking improvement, standardizing, scaling, and sustaining. So there's a lot that can go on in these different stages to give you a sense of what it means. In essence, the number of drones and pilots will increase as you move up through the stages. That's not explicitly required. So for example, you could be a small company that's actually quite sophisticated. But typically what happens is you get up to stage 4 and 5 and you're at sort of the, tens, if not hundreds of drones. Likewise, what tends to happen is the amount of flying you do will increase as you get more and more sophisticated. The complexity increases. So typically starting out, sub 2 kilo drones, very small ones, just doing line of sight operations, and then moving up to larger drones beyond line of sight, etc. And then this in turn increases the value that it delivers to the company. So doing a lot more things, a lot more complicated things. And the integration into the company's operations also increases over time. So, it might start out as one person doing something in one department, and then eventually goes into it's deeply integrated into everything the organization does. It's part of the organization's goals and objectives. And then with that brings other challenges around management and oversight. So you've got all this cool drone stuff going on. Management find out about it. They're like, okay, we now need to put some systems in place. So the complexity of those systems also tends to increase as you go through the stages. So sort of, to summarize, if you had to put, a couple of words against each of these stages, stage one, typically just straight up, just trying to validate a use case. Stage two, you're just trying to learn, typically as much as you can about, what's best practice, what's the compliance like. Three is typically you're trying to drive consistency across all your operations. Four, you've now got a lot of operations, so you want to make them as efficient as possible. And then five, you've now done all this good work, getting everything set up. How do you keep it in place? So that's kind of a really rough overview of the way we've set up this particular framework. So digging into these in a bit more detail, we'll go into stage one. So what does it look like? Typically you're just trying to prove up that drones can actually deliver some value for some use case in the business. Typically be using something small, really to avoid any of those, regulatory constraints which kick in with larger drones. It's frequently just your personal drone. So someone in the company says, I want to try this out. They actually get one of their own drones, start capturing some data and trying to prove up a use case. So they're typically doing this not as part of their role in the organization. It's kind of something they're doing on the side, out of interest, more than anything, and trying to turn that into something that the company can adopt. So what are the typical challenges people see here? Lots of close calls and potentially crashes. And that's just generally because people are typically not formally trained. So that becomes an issue. The benefits of using drones are not yet quantified. And you typically still see, they're seen as a toy. So other people in the organization see someone using a drone and they're kind of like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's a cool toy, but I'm not going to, it doesn't add any real value to the organization. So what should be the goals at this stage? One is definitely getting an ROI, return on investment, for using drones. So this is basically trying to put some numbers against the activities that you've been performing to start to build that, tangible business case. And the other thing you really want to start to try and do is find out who in management can support a wider rollout, because typically you're going to need that sort of champion to help you down the line. So moving on to stage two, what does this typically look like? You're starting to basically perform more operations now, probably still smaller drones. You may have implemented some basic sort of management control systems, typically going to be paper-based, maybe some basic checklists or some risk assessments. You might have some dedicated pilots, but generally it's going to be a part-time thing that people do as just part of their job. And really trying to get out there, understand what other people are doing, and just try and understand how we can start to grow the drone program. So typical challenges you'll come up against here. So obviously, once you start doing things, management goes, oh, okay, we're using drones. How are we managing that? And this can start to bring in some constraints or oversight, which can be good and can often be constraining. So that will start to happen. Probably the big one we hear is no budget. So we've kind of proved up a use case. We want to start using them more and more, but we can't get budget. So what should be the goals here? Typically what you want to try and do is get support amongst other departments in the organization to start trying to use drones and prove it up within their departments, because obviously you get that momentum within the organization. The more use cases, the better the business case you can actually make to growing it and expanding it. And what you really want to do is, make it pretty indispensable. So, you do a job so much faster or so much safer than it's currently done. It's kind of hard to ignore. You can't say, let's stop this now. It kind of forces its way in. And you also want to start really thinking about what's the sort of longer term strategy going to be and a plan for executive sign off. So this is coming back again to understanding how best practice is. So, and understanding, you will have to go through stages along the journey. You kind of can't jump to stage 5. Well, you can try. I don't know how successful it will be, but it's a journey. So really conveying to management, you've thought about this, you've done your research, you've done your homework, you've got some numbers, and you've got a plan, right? And then, the plan doesn't have to be perfect, but you've got a pretty solid plan. So once you sort of achieve that, and you now basically got some budget, you've bought some more drones, you're getting more people trained up. What you'll typically want to start doing is standardizing operations. So you now got different people operating. So typically this is where an operations manual will come in. You may start to want to actually go through some regulator approval processes, get things all more formal, more firmed up. So it's actually a proper functioning system. At this stage, probably typically all your pilots have some sort of formal training, just to make sure they're all at that same level, same base level. And you've probably appointed some sort of chief pilot or, program manager, basically someone who's responsible for driving this now. That may still be a part-time role, but it will eventually sort of evolve into potentially into a full-time role. So what are the challenges here? So as I mentioned, you've got other people now operating. So data capture can be a bit hit and miss on the quality. So you might have to start repeating things. You start to get to sort of a number of drone pilots where trying to manage all the approval process, all the flight planning operations, it starts to become a little bit unmanageable. And the compliance overhead starts to actually slow things down. So people are spending more time on paperwork and less time on flying. So what are the goals? We would certainly recommend trying to get some sort of electronic management system in place to streamline all those sort of overheads. On top of that, trying to come up with some standardized procedures that are use case specific. So, we do an inspection this way, we do a surveying job this way. Really trying to nail down the actual process that the pilot will go through, using all the bits of software that they need to use and settings they need to have and all those sorts of things, just beyond straight compliance. So cool, you've now done that. You've been given the green light to go crazy and start scaling this up. So, you'll typically start to roll out across multiple sites, depending on the organization. That might be in multiple countries as well. You're starting to get into the more complex operations. So starting to look at, extended visual line of sight, flying with larger drones, flying at night, et cetera, et cetera. You've got budget now. Someone said this is actually key to kind of the organization. So we're allocating some budget to actually do this. And then what comes with the challenges here? So onboarding and training new pilots. So again, you're kind of rapidly scaling up numbers. So getting people onboarded and trained efficiently is kind of will become one of those challenges. And just the geographic dispersion of people now. So whoever's in that sort of role of overseeing everything, you can't physically go and see them easily. How do you manage all that and sort of maintain that oversight? And then the one which sneaks up on people is actually data management. So you're now starting to collect a lot of data just storing it, managing it, starts to become a real problem. So you have to start thinking about how you're going to deal with that. So what should the goals be? Definitely some sort of robust onboarding and training system to help manage people. You can be pretty confident once they've gone through that, they're going to be operating at a high level. You actually have to start really thinking about maintenance. How is that going to work? Because you'll now start to have turnover in the fleet. You're going to have drones in and out of service all over the place, and it's going to start to be hard to track. So you have to have some sort of system to manage all that. And then finally, you've got everything rolled out, everything's humming away. How do you now sustain that so you don't actually go backwards? So typically, yeah, like I said, you'll have multiple operations across multiple sites. Typically now you're going to have very clear roles and responsibilities. You might have a chief remote pilot and senior remote pilots. There's a very clear structure around it. The overall program is aligned with the organization's goals. So, it's basically seen by senior management as actually being pretty important to the organization and day-to-day operations. So there's kind of that alignment there. And yeah, you start to get into the really complex stuff. So, the beyond line of sight, the drone in the box type applications sort of happen on a regular basis. And what are the challenges here? So knowledge retention is a big one. Basically, the big danger here is that chief remote pilot, who's seen it all the way through, leaves, and all the knowledge leaves with them. We've seen that a few times. That's happened to a few different organizations, and everything kind of falls to pieces. So it's one of the things you got to keep an eye out for. The other big one is change management. So obviously, you have a lot of different changing technologies. You've now got a large fleet, a lot of people. That change has to be propagated across everybody. So you can't just quickly change something and carry on. It's actually has to go through a bit of a process to try and manage that. And then the one everyone faces, you want to do the more complex stuff. So you start to hit those regulator approval challenges and try and put those more sophisticated applications together. So what should the goals be here? Again, it's kind of this integration and making it sustainable. So tying it into the existing enterprise systems within the business. Building a way to capture knowledge and share that across people in the organization. So we know there's a few organizations that have set up internal intranets and internal groups to basically get that knowledge sharing happening between everybody in the organization. And then that process is in place to essentially adapt. So any new technology that comes along can be deployed really quickly. So, again, a new model of drone comes along. How do you roll that out efficiently? A new payload comes along. How do you get that into everyone's hands, trained up, and operating as quickly as possible? So that's a bit of an overview of, in a little bit of detail on each of the 5 stages. So how do we help you on this journey? Basically, the way we've designed the platform and our sort of feature tiers kind of aligns with different stages you go through. So at our free tier, you're just starting out, you need something light, something basic, and we've got some basic features in our free plan to support you there. Through to the business plan, which starts to get into more of those around the regulatory compliance and managing all the maintenance and things like that. Through to teams where you start now, you're having to manage lots of people. So you've got conformance monitoring and currency management, and doing approvals in the field app, all the way through up to sort of that enterprise level, multiple companies, you're sharing resources between organizations across multiple countries as well. And you're starting to now leverage the FlyFreely and tying it back into enterprise systems to sort of automate the whole sort of workflow. so that's kind of a bit of an overview of how we sort of fit into the picture. The other thing we've done is tried to translate all this into a bit of a benchmark. So this is actually something free you can go and do right now. And what it is, it's essentially scoring you on, I think, around 19 to 20 different areas. You can see them basically in that plot there, from strategy to how you manage pilots or the mission process and maintenance. And we've tried to relate that back to where you would sit in the 5 stages. It's not perfect, but it'll give you a sense of where you're at, and then some sort of practical things you can try and do to progress sort of to the next stage. And like I said, it's free. You can repeat it any time. We sort of recommend, you do it now. You set a plan, because part of this, it will kind of give you an idea of what stage 5 looks like and stage 4. So you can actually make a plan on, okay, I want to improve in this area. And then in 12 months' time, come back to it again and see how things have changed. And once you've done that process, we're happy to basically do a free one-on-one consultation with you.